Difficult stains, just wash off.
In the 70s and 80s, millions of Americans weren't watching Johnny Carson or sitcom reruns. They were glued to a cheeky Brit, sprinting around in fast motion to Yakety Sax. The Benny Hill Show exploded into a stateside hit, mixing slapstick, innuendo, and ridiculous chase scenes. But why did this bawdy little import win over US audiences so completely? The reasons are stranger, funnier, and more revealing than you might expect. America's unlikely crush on a British export. If you think about it, the Benny Hill Show becoming a US hit makes about as much sense as Americans suddenly obsessing over cricket scores. On paper, it just shouldn't have worked. British comedy wasn't exactly known for storming American living rooms. Monty Python had its quirky fans, sure, but that was more college dorm humor than mainstream family TV. And yet, there was Benny Hill, this pudgy middle-aged guy in a flat cap, mugging at the camera and sprinting after women in heels, pulling in millions of viewers across the states. So how did this happen? Honestly, it slipped in through the side door. The Benny Hill Show didn't arrive with a big primetime launch or glossy NBC promo. It crept into America through late-night reruns and syndicated time slots. Local stations needed cheap filler after the evening news, and suddenly, there was Benny, chasing nurses around a park in fast forward. Viewers who stumbled onto it, beer in hand, remote in the other, were hooked before they even knew what was happening. And here's the thing. It didn't matter if you didn't get British slang or understand the cultural references. Benny's humor spoke a language everyone understood: slapstick. A banana peel gag lands in Cleveland just as well as it does in London. You didn't need subtitles to laugh at someone getting smacked with a frying pan or sprinting in circles to the tune of Yakety Sax. The weirdest twist? While Americans were falling in love with him, folks back in the UK were kind of moving on. Critics were rolling their eyes, calling him outdated, and the younger crowd wanted edgier, cooler comedy. But in the US, he was a superstar. It was like dating someone your hometown thought was boring, but in another city, they're suddenly the most exciting person in the room. So what was the real secret behind Benny's stateside takeover? It wasn't wit, or wordplay, or even the accent. It was something far simpler and almost impossible not to laugh at. The language of slapstick. Here's the thing about Benny Hill. You didn't need to get him to laugh at him. His comedy worked like a universal remote. It clicked no matter where you were or who you were.
Why, Mervyn, what's the matter with you? I've never seen you like this before.
I've never seen you like that before.
In an era when a lot of TV humor leaned on punchlines, politics, or topical references, Benny kept it as simple as a pie in the face. Literally. Slapstick is the oldest trick in the comedy book, and Benny Hill wielded it like a master. Think about the great silent film legends: Charlie Chaplin wobbling with his cane, Buster Keaton narrowly dodging a falling building, even the Three Stooges bonking each other over the head. That kind of humor doesn't care about your language or your background. It's physical, exaggerated, and instant. You don't need subtitles for a man tripping over a bucket. You just laugh. For American audiences, this was golden. After long days filled with heavy news, Vietnam, Watergate, Cold War tensions, nobody wanted more seriousness. They wanted to turn on the TV, switch off their brains, and watch a grown man get knocked into a pond by a runaway bicycle. Benny gave them exactly that. No politics, no lectures, just pure, goofy relief. And it wasn't just the slapstick itself, it was the speed. Benny's sketches moved fast, never lingering too long on a gag. If one joke didn't land, don't worry, another pratfall was coming in 10 seconds. Compare that to American sitcoms of the time, which often took a whole 22 minutes to set up a single running joke. Benny Hill was comedy on fast forward, and viewers couldn't get enough of that quick hit style. It's no exaggeration to say his humor hit like fast food. Quick, greasy, maybe not the healthiest, but oh so satisfying in the moment. And just like fries and burgers, people kept coming back for another serving. But slapstick alone wasn't the whole recipe. What really spiced things up was Benny's cheeky streak, the kind of humor that felt just a little naughty, but never mean. You'll get what we mean in the next. The naughty but nice factor. If slapstick was the hook, then saucy innuendo was the line that kept reeling Americans in. Benny Hill had a gift for towing that delicate line between risque and raunchy. His sketches were filled with double entendres, winks at the camera, and setups that suggested more than they ever actually showed. It was humor with a raised eyebrow, silly, flirty, and just saucy enough to feel rebellious without ever crossing into something you'd have to hide from grandma. For American audiences in the 70s and 80s, this was gold. Network television at the time played things squeaky clean. Sure, you had sitcoms like Three's Company hinting at sexual misunderstandings, but Benny Hill went further, still safe for broadcast. Bold enough to feel daring. He gave viewers the thrill of laughing at something a little naughty without guilt. After all, these weren't dirty jokes in the back of a magazine. This was mainstream television. Kind of. Part of the fun was in the exaggeration. Benny wasn't a smooth ladies' man. He was usually the butt of his own jokes. He'd chase women in wigs and costumes only to end up humiliated, smacked, or tricked. The comedy wasn't really about male conquest. It was about the silliness of the chase itself. Americans understood the winks and giggles, but they also saw Benny as the clown who always got what was coming to him. And let's be honest, there was also the eye candy. The Hills Angels dancers, often dressed in glamorous and funny outfits, added a spark of sex appeal that balanced out Benny's buffoonery. To many viewers, it was harmless fun. To critics, it was lowbrow pandering. But to tired Americans flipping channels at midnight, it was pure entertainment. A mix of comedy, flirtation, and a dash of rebellion against the strict rules of primetime TV. In short, Benny gave Americans something they weren't really getting elsewhere on their screens. Humor that felt grown up without being heavy, naughty without being mean-spirited, and silly enough to make you laugh out loud even when you knew you probably shouldn't. Escaping blue-collar America. One of the strangest reasons The Benny Hill Show clicked so hard in the US had less to do with comedy style and more to do with timing. For a lot of working-class Americans, TV wasn't just background noise, it was a nightly escape hatch. And Benny Hill, with his goofy sketches and zero-commitment humor, became the perfect way to clock out of reality after a long day. Picture this. It's the late 70s. You've worked a shift at the factory, maybe spent hours stuck in traffic. Maybe your paycheck isn't stretching as far as you'd like. The evening news is wall-to-wall with stories about inflation, Cold War standoffs, and political scandals. Then, boom, here comes Benny, wobbling into a scene dressed as a bumbling waiter, tripping over trays and landing in a cream pie. Suddenly, your living room feels lighter. That was the magic. The show didn't ask for focus or deep thought. It asked for a chuckle. You didn't need to watch every episode or follow a storyline. You could drop in, catch a gag, and leave happier than you started. In a way, Benny Hill became late-night comfort food, predictable, easy, and filling in all the right ways. And the timing of its broadcast made a huge difference. Because the show aired mostly in late-night slots or on weekends, it found an audience of regular Americans who were winding down, flipping through channels, or just looking for something silly to wash away the stress. For many, The Benny Hill Show became part of the ritual, like grabbing a beer, kicking back, and letting Benny's antics scrub the day out of your brain. Critics might have sniffed at the simplicity of the humor, but that was exactly the point. Comedy didn't need to be clever to be effective. For millions of Americans, it was a relief to laugh at a goofy sketch instead of listening to one more serious lecture about the world falling apart. In other words, Benny Hill wasn't just funny, he was therapeutic. A parade of characters, skits, and silliness. One thing that made the Benny Hill Show so addictive was its buffet-style approach to comedy.
I didn't do a stomach much good either, did I?
Oh, you're joking, of course.
You never got just one joke or one character. You got a whole parade of them, marching across the screen at lightning speed. If slapstick was the main course, the endless stream of sketches was the all-you-can-eat side dish that kept Americans coming back for seconds, thirds, and fourths. Each episode was like opening a grab bag. You never quite knew what you were going to get. Benny as a bumbling milkman, Benny as a hopeless doctor, Benny as a clueless policeman who couldn't catch a crook if his life depended on it. There were running gags, visual tricks, and quick-fire sketches that barely lasted a minute before cutting to the next one. The variety format meant you didn't have time to get bored if one joke didn't land. The next was already on its way. For American audiences used to sitcoms where you spent half the episode waiting for the punchline, this was revolutionary. Benny Hill didn't stretch a gag for 20 minutes. He fired off 3 or 4 in that same time. It was comedy for people with short attention spans, long before social media and TikTok ever existed. And let's not forget the recurring bits. There was something comforting about seeing familiar patterns. The clueless authority figure, the mistaken identity skit, the inevitable chase at the end. It was predictable in the best way, like hearing your favorite joke retold with a little twist each time. Audiences didn't just laugh, they anticipated the laugh. The silliness was part of the charm. Nothing was too ridiculous, too exaggerated, or too absurd to try. If Benny wanted to dress up as a tea-sipping old lady and scold passers-by, he did it. If he wanted to bumble through a skit as Napoleon or a cowboy, he did that too. The world of the show was a playground, and Americans happily signed up to watch the game. In short, the Benny Hill Show worked like a comedy carousel. You didn't ride it for the destination, you rode it for the fun of going in circles, laughing every time the horse came around again. And of course, no matter how many sketches filled an episode, everyone knew where things were heading. The grand finale chase that turned chaos into pure comic legend. The addictive, speeded-up chase. If the Benny Hill Show were a meal, the chase scene at the end was dessert, the part everyone really came for. You know the one, Benny, wide-eyed and panicked.
Is that I'd be coming out now? I'll see you. Goodbye. Going to hell.
Sprinting through parks, hallways, and city streets, always trailed by a mob of people. Policemen, nurses, old ladies, random bystanders, all set to that frantic saxophone tune, Yakety Sax. It didn't matter if you'd seen it once or 100 times. The second that music kicked in, you knew the laughs were about to land. The genius of the chase was its simplicity. There was no setup, no dialogue, no complicated story, just chaos in motion. Everyone ran in and out of frame like wind-up toys, arms flailing, hats flying, Benny dodging grabs at the last second. And because the footage was sped up, the whole thing looked like a Looney Tunes cartoon brought to life. You didn't even need context. You could tune in with 30 seconds left and still be in stitches. For Americans, this became the show's trademark. The one thing you could count on no matter how wild the episode had been. It was the comedy equivalent of a catchy chorus in a pop song. Familiar, infectious, and impossible not to hum along with. The chase gave every episode a sense of rhythm and closure. A guaranteed high note to send you off laughing. And here's the kicker. The chase scene escaped the show itself and took on a life of its own in American pop culture. Sports blooper reels borrowed the formula. Slapstick moments of players tripping or referees colliding edited to Yakety Sax. Late-night shows spoofed it, cartoons copied it, and decades later, even YouTube memes revived it. Whenever chaos needed a soundtrack, there it was. Benny Hill's runaway finale, cueing laughter across generations. What made it stick wasn't just the silliness, but the ritual of it. You knew it was coming. You waited for it. and when it arrived, it felt like an inside joke between you and the show. That's why, to this day, even people who've never watched a full episode know the chase. It wasn't just a skit, it became comedy shorthand for pure ridiculous fun. Sex appeal and the Benny Hill Girls. No one can talk about the Benny Hill Show without mentioning the famous Hill's Angels, the troupe of glamorous dancers and models who popped up in sketches, often in skimpy costumes, sometimes in comedic disguises, and always as part of Benny's playful antics.
That's made of real Sheffield steel. Real Sheffield steel, them are. And you...
For many American viewers, this was part of the show's strange, irresistible cocktail. Slapstick comedy stirred together with a splash of sex appeal. Now, this wasn't Playboy spread kind of risque. The sexy side of Benny Hill was more wink-wink than outright scandalous. The women might be in short skirts, bikinis, or nurse uniforms, but the vibe was playful rather than predatory. Benny wasn't painted as a suave heartthrob sweeping them off their feet. More often, he was the fool desperately chasing them, only to end up outsmarted, humiliated, or literally smacked for his trouble. The laugh wasn't on the women, it was on Benny himself. That balance mattered. To American audiences in the 70s and 80s, the show delivered just enough naughtiness to feel daring without tipping over into something sleazy. It was a little rebellious, something you knew the TV censors wouldn't have allowed in primetime US sitcoms, but still silly enough that you could laugh at it with your buddies and not feel like you were crossing a line. And in a way, the Hill's Angels reflected the era's broader culture. This was the age of disco, Playboy, and glossy magazines that celebrated glamour and sexuality in mainstream spaces. Benny Hill's show mirrored that trend, packaging it with slapstick so it never took itself too seriously. For many men, it was eye candy. For many women, it was harmless fluff. For critics, of course, it was one more reason to groan and call the show sexist. But for millions of Americans sitting on their couches, it was part of the charm. The formula worked: laughter, pratfalls, a dash of innuendo, and a parade of pretty faces. Together, it created a package that felt just a little bit naughty and a whole lot of fun. Rebellion against serious comedy. By the time the Benny Hill Show landed in America, comedy was starting to get, well, serious. Late-night talk shows leaned on political jabs. Sketch comedy like Saturday Night Live was tackling social issues head-on, and stand-up comedians were pushing into sharp-edged commentary about culture, race, and class. It was clever, smart, and often brilliant, but sometimes people just didn't want their laughs wrapped in homework. That's where Benny Hill swooped in like a pie to the face. His comedy wasn't about political scandals or big social statements. It was about slipping on a banana peel, running from angry policemen, or getting slapped by a little old lady.
He's a lovely boy. I don't care what anybody says. He's my son. I won't hear it. I wonder what about this lovely reference they give him? This lovely reference he says.
While American comedy was busy making points, Benny Hill was busy making faces. And for a lot of viewers, that felt like a rebellion of its own. It was comedy as a guilty pleasure. Watching Benny Hill wasn't about being in the know or proving you understood satire. It was about letting yourself enjoy something silly. No debates, no political baggage, no inside jokes that only made sense if you'd read the morning paper. Just pratfalls, chases, and hilarious gags. Think of it as the popcorn movie of television comedy. Sure, you could watch a thoughtful drama if you wanted, but sometimes you just needed explosions, car chases, and popcorn. Benny Hill was the comedy version of that escape. He didn't demand you analyze, he just wanted you to laugh. And that, oddly enough, made him kind of rebellious. In an era where comedy was often praised for its sophistication, the Benny Hill Show stood out precisely because it wasn't sophisticated. It reminded audiences that dumb fun still had a place on TV, and sometimes that was exactly what people needed. A time capsule of TV freedom. Looking back, the Benny Hill Show feels like a strange little time capsule, one that could only have existed when it did. Local U.S. stations slipped it into late-night slots without the same heavy censorship that shaped primetime TV, and that gave Benny the freedom to be mischievous, silly,
Schwein, was ist? Again, aber für Bacon in der Oven. Nuts!
and just a little outrageous. To viewers, it felt almost forbidden, like something you weren't entirely supposed to be watching, which only made it more fun. Today, it's hard to imagine a show like Benny's finding the same footing. Comedy has shifted, tastes have changed, and what once seemed daring might now spark endless online debates. But in the 70s and 80s, The Benny Hill Show gave Americans exactly what they craved: a goofy, harmless escape, wrapped in slapstick, innuendo, and speeded-up chases. It wasn't high art, but that was the point. It was laughter, pure and simple. Benny Hill proved that sometimes the strangest things make the biggest splash, and that laughter doesn't need translation. For more deep dives into pop culture's quirks, don't forget to subscribe and join us next time.